The bedroom held its breath. Moonlight pressed through silk curtains, casting silver shadows across tangled sheets. Elena lay perfectly still, her bare shoulder exposed to the cool air, her heart suspended between one beat and the next. His arm tightened around her waist. His lips brushed her hair. And then he spoke. Valentina. The name floated through darkness like poison. Her sister's name, whispered with tenderness, with longing, with something that sounded terrifyingly like love. Elena didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't shatter, not yet. She simply opened her eyes and stared at the wall, feeling something fundamental crack inside her chest. 3 years. 3 years of loving him, of building a life in his shadow, of believing she was seen. And in one unconscious whisper, Alessandro Vitali had revealed the truth she'd been too afraid to see. She was never the one he wanted. She was just the one who stayed. Before I continue this story of heartbreak, obsession, and the dangerous path to redemption, please like, share, and subscribe. Elena moved like smoke through the darkness. She slipped from beneath his arm with practiced silence, her feet finding the cold marble floor without sound. The massive bedroom, their bedroom she had foolishly called it, stretched around her like a mausoleum. Alessandro shifted in his sleep. The tattoos crawling up his neck caught moonlight, Italian script that spelled words she'd never asked him to translate. His forearm lay exposed across the pillow where her head had been, more ink visible beneath the scattered light. Even his knuckles bore marks, symbols of a life built on control and violence. She had traced those tattoos 1,000 times, had pressed her lips to the ink on his neck while he held her close, had believed they meant something, that she meant something. Her clothes lay scattered near the chaise. She dressed in silence, each movement mechanical, her mind floating somewhere distant and numb. The closet held 3 years of her life. Designer dresses he'd chosen, jewelry that cost more than her childhood home, evidence of a woman who had disappeared into his world completely. She took nothing. Her purse sat on the vanity. Inside, her original ID, a credit card in her maiden name, cash she'd hidden for reasons she never wanted to examine. Some part of her had always known this moment would come. She paused at the bedroom door. Alessandro lay sprawled across silk sheets, his dark hair tousled against the pillow, his face peaceful in sleep. The hard lines of his jaw softened. The cold intensity that defined his waking hours dissolved into something almost boyish. He looked like a man capable of love, but not her love. Never her love. Valentina. The name echoed through her skull, sharp and merciless. Her older sister. The beautiful one. The bold one. The one who had dated Alessandro first, 3 years ago, before walking away from him without explanation. Elena had met him 6 months later, had fallen completely, had built her entire existence around a man who whispered another woman's name in the dark. She turned away. The hallway stretched endlessly, marble and shadows, priceless art watching her departure. Alessandro's men were stationed throughout the estate, but she knew their patterns, knew the gaps. She had learned to navigate his world like a ghost. The kitchen entrance led to the gardens. The gardens led to the east gate. The east gate led to a service road where she could walk until she found somewhere, anywhere that wasn't his. Cool night air hit her face. She didn't cry. The tears would come later, she knew, when the numbness wore off, when the magnitude of what she'd just lost, what she'd never truly had, finally registered. For now, she simply walked. The estate fell away behind her. The iron gates, the security cameras, the prison she had decorated with love and called home. Dawn was still hours away when she reached the main road. She kept walking. Alessandro woke to emptiness. His hand reached automatically for the warm body that should have been beside him, finding only cold sheets. His eyes opened slowly, adjusting to morning light that seemed too harsh, too accusing. Elena! Silence answered. He sat up, the sheet pooling at his waist, his tattooed forearms bracing against the mattress. The bedroom held no trace of her, no sound of running water, no movement in the closet, no lingering scent of her perfume. Something cold settled in his chest. He moved through the room with growing unease, checking the bathroom, the closet, the balcony. Her clothes from last night were gone. Her purse had vanished. The small things she kept on the vanity. A hairbrush, a bottle of perfume, a photograph of them together, remained untouched. But she was gone. His phone showed no messages, no missed calls, nothing to explain why the woman who had shared his bed for 3 years had simply disappeared. Marco. His voice carried through the estate with cold authority. Within moments, his right-hand man appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. Boss, where is Elena? Something flickered across Marco's face. She left, sir. Around for this morning. East Gate. Left. The word tasted wrong in Alessandro's mouth. Where? She didn't say. She didn't take a car. She just walked away. Alessandro stood motionless, his bare chest rising with controlled breaths, the tattoos on his neck shifting with the movement of his jaw as he clenched it. Elena didn't leave. She didn't walk away. She was here, always here, waiting when he came home, warming his bed, filling his silence with her quiet presence. She didn't leave. Find her. The command carried a weight that made Marco straighten instinctively. Sir, if she wanted to, find her. Alessandro's voice dropped to something dangerous. Now. Marco disappeared. Alessandro stood alone in the bedroom that suddenly felt cavernous, his hands curling into fists at his sides, ink-marked knuckles white with tension. He tried to remember last night. They had made love, slowly, tenderly, the way she liked. He had held her afterward, her small body curved against his chest. He had felt content. He had fallen asleep with her name on his lips. Hadn't he? A whisper of unease crept through his thoughts. Something just out of reach. Something important. His phone rang. Sir. Marco's voice was tense. She booked a train ticket. Left the city 2 hours ago. She's heading to Florence. Florence, where she had grown up, where her family still lived, where Valentina lived. The name triggered something, a flash of memory, a dream fragment. Alessandro went very still. His dream last night. Valentina's face. Valentina's voice. He had been reaching for her, calling for her, and then, Christ, the realization hit him like a bullet. He had said the name out loud, in his sleep, while Elena lay beside him, while Elena listened. His knees nearly buckled. Sir. Marco's voice crackled through the phone. Do you want me to intercept her? No. The word came out hoarse. No, I'll handle this myself. He ended the call and let the phone drop to the bed. 3 years. 3 years of building something he hadn't known he needed. 3 years of her patience, her warmth, her unwavering presence. And he had destroyed it all with a single word. His reflection stared back from the vanity mirror. The cold eyes, the sharp jaw, the tattoos that marked him as a man who controlled everything. The ink on his forearms spelled family in Italian, though he had none. The marks on his knuckles warned of violence, though he rarely needed to use it. He had built an empire on control. And in one unguarded moment, he had lost the only thing that mattered. The train carried Elena away from everything she knew. She sat in a private compartment, watching the Italian countryside blur past the window, her reflection a ghost superimposed on green hills and ancient villages. She still hadn't cried. The numbness had solidified into something harder, something that felt almost like armor. Her phone had rung 17 times. His name flashed across the screen with each call. His voice filled her mailbox with messages she deleted without listening. His texts accumulated like evidence of a crime she was too tired to prosecute. Where are you? Elena, please. Let me explain. It wasn't what you think. Come home. Home. As if she had ever truly had one. She had met Alessandro Vitali at a charity event in Milan, 6 months after her sister had abruptly ended their engagement. Valentina had never explained why she left him, had simply announced one day that it was over, that he wasn't what she wanted, that Elena wouldn't understand. Elena had understood one thing. Her sister discarded men like accessories. When Alessandro approached her at that gala, she hadn't known who he was, hadn't recognized the dangerous edge beneath his perfect suit, the power that rippled beneath his controlled exterior. She had only seen a man with wounded eyes and a smile that seemed rusty from disuse. She had fallen in love with his brokenness. What a fool she had been. The train pulled into Florence's Santa Maria Novella station as afternoon light painted the city gold. Elena gathered her single bag, purchased at a shop near the Rome station, filled with cheap basics, and stepped onto the platform. She had no plan, no destination, only the desperate need to be somewhere he wasn't. Her apartment from years ago was long gone. Her friends had drifted away during her years in Alessandro's world. Her mother had passed 2 years ago. There was only one person in Florence who might take her in, and that person was the reason she stood here with a shattered heart. Valentina Sartori opened her door to find her younger sister standing in the hallway. Elena! Her voice carried genuine shock. What are you? Can I stay? The question hung between them, weighted with years of complicated history. Sisters who looked alike but had never understood each other. The eldest who took what she wanted, and the youngest who took what remained. Valentina's expression shifted through surprise, concern, and finally something that looked almost like guilt. Of course. She stepped aside. Of course you can stay. The apartment was exactly what Elena expected. Modern. Expensive. Filled with the evidence of Valentina's successful life as an art dealer. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Arno River. Abstract paintings covered white walls. Everything beautiful, carefully curated, and somehow cold. Do you want to tell me what happened? Elena set her bag on the leather sofa. He said your name. The words fell between them like stones. Valentina went very still. What? Last night. In bed. He was asleep, and he... Elena's voice cracked for the first time. He said your name. Valentina. Like it was a prayer. Silence stretched through the apartment. Valentina's face had drained of color. She stood frozen near the window, afternoon light catching the angles of her face. The same dark hair as Elena, the same brown eyes, but sharper features, a harder edge. Elena! 3 years. Elena heard her own voice as if from a great distance. 3 years I gave him. I thought he loved me. I thought he'd finally moved on from whatever you two had. But he hasn't. He never did. I was just... She couldn't finish the sentence. A replacement. A substitute. A shadow of the woman he really wanted. I never meant for this to happen. Valentina's voice was barely a whisper. Elena looked at her sister. Really looked at her. And saw something she hadn't expected. Fear. What happened between you two? The question she had never asked. Why did you leave him? Valentina turned away, arms wrapping around herself. It's complicated. He's been dreaming about you for 3 years. I think I deserve complicated. A long pause. I didn't leave him. Valentina's voice trembled. He sent me away. Elena's thoughts stuttered. What? He sent me away. For my own protection, he said. There was a threat, something he couldn't eliminate without putting me at risk. He told me to leave and never look back. Valentina turned, her eyes bright with unshed tears. He told me he didn't love me, that he never had, that I should find someone worthy of me. I don't understand. Neither did I. Valentina laughed bitterly. I believed him. I left. I spent months hating him, then years trying to forget him. When I heard he was with you, I thought... She shook her head. I thought he'd moved on. I thought he'd found something real with you. I was jealous, Elena. So jealous I couldn't see straight. But I also thought maybe it meant I was wrong. Maybe he really hadn't loved me. Elena's mind raced, trying to reconstruct 3 years of memories with this new information. Alessandro's distance, his careful control, the way he sometimes looked at her with something that might have been guilt. Had it all been performance? Had she been nothing but a shield against his real feelings? Why didn't you tell me? Elena's voice cracked. When I started dating him, why didn't you warn me? What was I supposed to say? Don't fall for him, he might still be in love with me? Valentina's laugh was hollow. You were so happy. For the first time since Mom got sick, you were actually happy. I couldn't take that from you. So instead you let me walk into a relationship built on lies. I didn't know it was lies. I thought maybe he really had moved on. People do move on, Elena. He whispered your name in his sleep. Elena's voice rose. Does that sound like moving on? Valentina had no answer. The The sisters stood on opposite sides of the living room, the river glittering gold behind them, 3 years of silence and secrets hanging in the air between them. "What are you going to do?" Valentina finally asked. Elena looked at her hands. Bare now, she had left her jewelry behind. No rings, no bracelets, no evidence that she had ever belonged to anyone. "I don't know." The admission hurt more than the betrayal. "I don't know who I am without him." Alessandro's men found her within 48 hours. He didn't send them to bring her back. Not yet. He simply needed to know she was safe. Needed to know where she slept, what she ate, whether she was protected in a world that knew exactly how valuable the Vitali woman would be to his enemies. The reports came every 6 hours. She's staying with her sister. She went shopping, basic items only. She visited a cafe near the Ponte Vecchio. She hasn't spoken to anyone but Valentina. He read each update in his study, surrounded by the silence of an empire that suddenly meant nothing. The mansion felt hollow. The bed felt cold. Every room held her ghost. Marco watched his boss with growing concern. "You need to sleep," he said on the 3rd day. "You need to eat. You need to. I need her back." The words came out raw and desperate, completely unlike the controlled man Marco had served for 15 years. "Then go get her. She doesn't want to see me." "So? You're Alessandro Vitali. When has what anyone wants ever stopped you?" Alessandro stood at the window of his study, staring out at gardens Elena had designed. Every flower, every path, every fountain, her choices, her touches, her attempts to bring beauty into his world of darkness. "This is different," he said quietly. "Why?" "Because I destroyed her. Because I took her heart and dropped another woman's name on it. Because she gave me everything and I gave her lies. Because she deserves better than force." Marco went silent. In 15 years of service, he had never heard his boss speak of what anyone deserved. Alessandro Vitali took what he wanted. That was the foundation of his power. But watching him now, the hollow eyes, the clenched jaw, the tattoos that seemed like prison bars rather than marks of authority, Marco saw something new. Alessandro wasn't just missing Elena. He was mourning her. 1 week turned into 2. Elena found a strange rhythm in Florence. Morning coffee at the same cafe, afternoon walks along the river, evenings spent in uncomfortable silence with her sister. They didn't talk about Alessandro. They didn't talk about the past. They existed in careful parallel, 2 women shaped by the same man but unable to bridge the distance he had created. She knew she was being watched. His men were skilled, but she had spent 3 years learning to read shadows. She spotted them in reflections, in crowds, in the careful way certain strangers avoided eye contact. Alessandro knew exactly where she was, and he was keeping his distance. She didn't know what to do with that information. Part of her, the part still raw with betrayal, wanted him to storm into Florence, to make demands, to prove he was exactly the controlling monster she needed him to be. It would be easier to hate him if he acted the villain. But he didn't come. He just watched. And waited. "You need to decide something," Valentina said one evening, as they shared wine on the balcony. "You can't live in limbo forever." "I'm not in limbo. I'm processing." "You're hiding." Elena wanted to argue, but she couldn't. Her sister was right. She had run from one cage straight into another, trading Alessandro's shadow for Florence's walls. "What would you do?" Elena asked. "If you were me?" Valentina stared at the river for a long moment. "I would talk to him." "Why?" "Because I never did. I let him send me away without a fight. And I spent years wondering what would have happened if I demanded answers." Valentina turned to face her. "You have questions. He has answers. You'll never move forward until you face him. He'll just lie to me again." "Probably." Valentina's smile was sad. "But at least you'll know you tried. At least you'll have closure." Closure. Such a neat word for such a messy situation. Elena drained her wine and stared at the darkening sky, wondering if she was strong enough to face the man who had broken her heart with another woman's name. He came to her on the 15th day. Elena was sitting in her usual cafe, a book open in her hands but unread, when the chair across from her scraped against stone. She looked up into the face of Alessandro Vitali. He looked terrible. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His cheeks seemed sharper, his jaw rougher with unshaved stubble. Even his clothes, a dark suit that would normally be immaculate, seemed slightly rumpled. But his tattoos remained the same, the ink crawling up his neck, visible above his open collar. The marks on his forearms exposed by rolled sleeves. The symbols on his knuckles, pressed flat against the table between them. Elena. Her name fell from his lips like a prayer. She closed her book slowly. Alessandro, you haven't answered my calls. I didn't want to talk to you. I know. He swallowed visibly. But I needed to see you. I needed to explain. Explain what? Her voice stayed calm, though her heart raced. Explain why you've been dreaming about my sister for 3 years? Explain why you said her name while you were in my arms? Explain why everything between us was apparently built on. I love you. The words cut through her anger like a blade. She stared at him, searching for lies, for manipulation, for the cold calculation that defined the mafia boss she had studied for 3 years. She found only desperation. You don't, she said quietly. You love her. You always have. I loved her. The admission seemed to cost him something vital. 3 years ago, I loved her. But I sent her away because staying would have killed her. Staying with me in my world with my enemies. It would have killed her. So you found a replacement. He flinched as if she'd struck him. No. Christ. Elena. No. Then what am I? The question hung between them. The cafe buzzed with conversation around them, tourists and locals oblivious to the quiet devastation unfolding at the corner table. Alessandro's hands curled into fists, tattoos stretching across his knuckles. When I met you, he said slowly, I thought you were a ghost. You looked so much like her. You moved like her. You even laughed like her. He met her eyes, and she saw something raw and bleeding in his gaze. I told myself I was using you to fill the hole she left. I told myself it was just convenience, just comfort, just... He trailed off. Just what? But somewhere along the way, it became real. His voice cracked. You became real. More real than anything else in my life. And I was too much of a coward to admit it, even to myself. Elena wanted to believe him. Every desperate part of her heart wanted to fall into his words and let them heal the wounds he had made. But trust, once shattered, wasn't so easily rebuilt. You said her name. I know. In our bed. While I was in your arms. I know. He looked down at his hands. I was dreaming about the past. About the day I sent her away. I was reliving the moment I lost everything. And in your dream, you were still in love with her. He went silent. The truth sat between them, ugly and undeniable. I don't know what my dreams mean, he finally said. I don't know why my subconscious holds onto things my waking mind has released. But I know what I feel when I'm awake, Elena. I know who I reach for in the morning. I know whose absence has destroyed me for the past 2 weeks. He reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. I know who I love. Elena stared at his fingers, the ink-marked knuckles, the careful distance he maintained. For 3 years, this man had controlled everything. Every room, every conversation, every relationship. He had moved through the world with absolute authority, bending reality to his will. And now he sat across from her in a public cafe, looking broken, sounding desperate, offering nothing but words she wasn't sure she could trust. I need time, she heard herself say. Something flickered in his eyes. Hope, maybe, or relief that she hadn't simply walked away. How much time? I don't know. I need to figure out who I am without you. I need to figure out if there even is a me that isn't shaped by your shadow. He nodded slowly. I'll wait. You might be waiting forever. Then I'll wait forever. The certainty in his voice made her chest ache. She stood, gathering her book, avoiding his eyes. Don't follow me, she said quietly. Don't send your men. Don't monitor my movements. If you really love me, give me space. Elena. I mean it, Alessandro. If you can't give me this, then we have nothing to discuss. She walked away without looking back. But she felt his eyes on her all the way down the street, burning through the afternoon light, refusing to release her even as she disappeared into the crowd. He withdrew his surveillance that night. Elena didn't know this until 3 days later, when she realized the familiar shadows were gone. No more reflections watching her in shop windows. No more strangers with earpieces lingering on corners. No more evidence that Alessandro Vitali was monitoring her every breath. The absence should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like abandonment. She hated herself for the contradiction. She had demanded space and he had given it. She should feel relieved. She should feel empowered. Instead, she felt more lost than ever. "He stopped watching you," Valentina observed one evening. "I noticed the change." "Good. Is it?" Elena didn't answer. She spent her days wandering Florence like a ghost, searching for pieces of herself that she'd surrendered to Alessandro years ago. She visited museums she'd once loved. She walked streets she'd memorized as a child. She tried to remember the woman she'd been before she became his. But that woman felt like a stranger now. 3 years of reshaping herself around his needs, his schedule, his world, it had erased something essential. She didn't know her own preferences anymore. Didn't know what she wanted to eat, where she wanted to live, what she wanted to do with the rest of her life. She had become a reflection of him. And reflections, she was learning, didn't exist on their own. The threat came without warning. Elena was walking home from her morning cafe when a black car pulled alongside her. A window rolled down. A man she didn't recognize smiled at her with cold eyes. "Ms. Sartori, someone would like to speak with you." Every instinct Alessandro had trained into her screamed alarm. "I don't think so." She kept walking. The car kept pace. It wasn't a request. She turned toward a more crowded street, her heart hammering. The car couldn't follow, blocked by pedestrian barriers. But hands closed around her arm from behind. "Let go of me. We just want to talk." The man's grip tightened. "Our employer has questions about Alessandro Vitali. We thought you might be able to answer them." Elena's blood went cold. She had known, abstractly, that leaving Alessandro's protection made her vulnerable. She had known that his enemies might see her departure as an opportunity. But she hadn't truly believed anyone would be bold enough to touch her. She had been wrong. "I don't know anything," she said carefully. "We're not together anymore. So we've heard." The man smiled. "Which is why this is such a perfect opportunity. Come with us willingly, and this stays civilized." Elena looked around desperately. Tourists passed without a second glance. Locals avoided eye contact. No one wanted to get involved. She was completely alone. For 3 years, Alessandro's shadow had been her constant companion. His protection had wrapped around her like armor, so complete she'd stopped noticing it. Now that armor was gone, and the wolves had noticed. "I'll scream," she warned. "Go ahead." The man shrugged. "We'll have you in the car before anyone reacts. This is a tourist area. People will assume it's a domestic dispute." His grip pulled her toward the waiting vehicle. Elena stumbled, her mind racing through options. She could fight, but he was bigger, stronger, prepared. She could scream, but he was right, nobody would intervene in time. She could. The shot came from nowhere. The man holding her jerked, his grip releasing as he crumpled to the ground. The car's tires screamed against pavement as it accelerated away. Elena stood frozen, blood roaring in her ears, the morning suddenly full of chaos. And then Marco was there. "Ms. Sartori." Alessandro's right-hand man took her arm with careful gentleness. "We need to leave. Now," he said. Her voice shook. "He said he'd stop watching." "He did." Marco guided her toward a different car, one that materialized from a side street. "But I didn't." She let herself be led into the vehicle, her body trembling with delayed shock. "Why?" Marco slid in beside her, murmuring instructions to the driver. "Because some of us know what the boss needs, even when he's too stubborn to admit it." The car pulled away. Elena stared at her hands, shaking, bloodless, and tried to process what had almost happened. Alessandro's enemies had found her. And despite everything, Alessandro's people had still been there to save her. They took her to a safe house in the Tuscan hills. Not the estate in Rome. Not anywhere Alessandro currently was. Just a small villa surrounded by cypress trees, staffed by silent men who treated her with careful respect. You're not a prisoner, Marco assured her. You can leave whenever you want. But given what just happened, I'd suggest staying until we neutralize the threat. What threat? Who were those men? Marco's expression tightened. Enemies of the family. They've been looking for leverage against Alessandro for months. When you left his protection, they saw an opportunity. To use me against him. Yes. Elena sank onto a leather sofa, her legs no longer able to hold her. She had wanted freedom, independence, a life outside Alessandro's shadow. Instead, she had nearly been kidnapped by men who saw her as nothing but a weapon to wound the man she'd left behind. Does he know? She asked quietly. Does Alessandro know what happened? Marco hesitated. Yes. Is he coming? Another hesitation. He wanted to. He was halfway to the airport when I talked him down. Why did you stop him? Because you asked him to give you space. Marco's voice was surprisingly gentle. And despite every instinct screaming at him to find you, to protect you himself, he's trying to respect what you need. Elena closed her eyes. This was Alessandro's way of saying I love you, not with words or grand gestures, but with restraint. With the hardest thing he could possibly give her. Freedom from his presence, even when every part of him wanted to control the situation himself. Tell him. She swallowed hard. Tell him thank you. Marco nodded and left her alone. She stayed at the safe house for 4 days. During that time, Marco kept her updated on the situation. Carefully, professionally, treating her like an asset to be protected, rather than a woman who had shattered his boss's heart. The men who had tried to take her belonged to a rival organization. The Benedetti family had been circling Alessandro for years, looking for weaknesses. Her departure had looked like an opportunity too good to pass up. We've sent a message, Marco said on the 4th day. They won't try again. What kind of message? His silence was answer enough. Elena didn't ask for details. She didn't want them. 3 years in Alessandro's world had taught her that some questions were better left unasked. But she found herself thinking about him constantly. About the way he had looked at her in that cafe, desperate, broken, completely unlike the controlled man she had known. About the way he had withdrawn his surveillance when she asked, even though it went against every instinct he possessed. About the way he had stayed away even now, when she was in danger because she had asked him to. He was trying. For her, he was trying to be something other than what he had always been. The question was whether it would ever be enough. On the 5th day, she asked to see him. Marco looked at her with something like relief. I'll make the call. Alessandro arrived that evening. Elena heard the car first. The crunch of gravel, the slam of doors, urgent footsteps on stone. She stood in the living room of the safe house, her heart racing, her hands curled into fists at her sides. The door opened. He looked worse than the cafe. The dark circles had deepened. His suit hung loose on a frame that seemed to have lost weight. His hair was disheveled. His jaw covered in stubble that was approaching a beard. But his eyes blazed with life when he saw her. Elena. Her name on his lips made something crack inside her chest. Alessandro. They stood across the room from each other, the distance between them charged with everything unsaid. Are you hurt? He asked quietly. No. Your man got there in time. Marco told me. His jaw tightened. I wanted to come sooner. I wanted to. I know. He took a step closer. When I heard what happened, I thought, his voice broke. I thought I'd lost you. Not to your own choice but to my enemies. Because I wasn't there to protect you. It wasn't your fault. Everything is my fault. Another step. Loving you is my fault. Letting you go is my fault. Not being honest about what I felt. Stop. He stopped. Elena crossed the distance between them slowly, watching his face, reading the desperate hope in his eyes. I've been thinking, she said quietly, about what you said in the cafe. About loving her. About loving me. Elena, let me finish. He nodded, his hands clenching at his sides. I don't know if I can ever trust you completely. I don't know if the doubt will ever go away. The fear that I'm just a shadow of what you really wanted. She met his eyes directly. But I know that I can't live like this either. Running. Hiding. Pretending I don't love you when you're all I think about. His breath caught. You hurt me, she continued. You hurt me in a way that might never fully heal. But when those men grabbed me, when I thought I was about to lose everything, the only thing I could think about was you. How I would never see you again. How our last conversation had been in anger. Elena, I'm not saying I forgive you. I'm not saying we can go back to how things were. But I'm willing to try to find something new. Something honest. He reached for her then, his hand trembling as it cupped her face. I'll tell you everything, he promised. About Valentina. About the past. About every fear and doubt that haunts my sleep. I'll give you every truth I have, even the ugly ones. Even the ones that might make you leave for good. And if I can't accept them, then at least you'll know exactly what I am. And exactly what you mean to me. His thumb traced her cheekbone, impossibly gentle for a man whose hands had done terrible things. What do I mean to you? She whispered. His eyes held hers. Dark, intense, stripped of every defense. You mean everything. You mean more than the empire I've built. More than the power I've accumulated. More than the family name I've carried my entire life. His voice roughened. I would burn it all down, Elena. Every business, every alliance, every. She kissed him. The words dissolved between their lips, replaced by something older and more desperate. His arms wrapped around her instantly, pulling her against him, holding her as if she might disappear if he loosened his grip. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead pressed against hers. Come home, he breathed. Please. Not yet. He tensed. I need time, she said carefully. Not to run from you, but to find myself. I need to know who I am outside your world before I can decide if I want to be part of it. How long? I don't know. Weeks. Maybe months. The struggle on his face was visible. Every instinct screaming at him to refuse, to claim her, to drag her back to Rome where he could keep her safe. But then, slowly, deliberately, he nodded. I'll wait. No surveillance this time. I can't promise that. His jaw tightened. The Benedettis will regroup. They'll try again. Then tell me. Be honest about it. Let me be part of the decisions that affect my own safety. He considered this. All right. And talk to me. Call me. Let me know you're still there. Even if we're apart. Every day, he promised. Every hour if you'll let me. Something loosened in her chest. The tight knot of fear that had lived there since she'd fled Rome in the dark. We'll figure this out, she said quietly. Together. His arms tightened around her. Together. The next month tested both of them. Elena returned to Florence. But things were different now. She spoke to Alessandro every day. Sometimes briefly. Sometimes for hours. They talked about small things. What she'd eaten. Where she'd walked. What she'd noticed in the city she was rediscovering. And they talked about big things too. He told her about Valentina, the real story. How he'd fallen in love with her at a business function. Drawn to her confidence and fire. How he'd thought she could survive his world. How a threat from a rival family had changed everything. They were going to kill her, he said one night, his voice flat with old pain. The Benedettis. Her death would have sent a message, weakened me, destroyed my reputation for protecting what was mine. The only way to keep her safe was to make her worthless as a target. So you pushed her away. I made her hate me. I said things I'll never forgive myself for. I made sure she would never want to come back. His exhale was ragged. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. And then I came along. 6 months later. Looking so much like her that I thought I was losing my mind. He paused. I told myself I was using you. It was easier than admitting the truth. What truth? That I was falling in love again. That you were making me feel things I thought were buried forever. That somewhere along the way, you stopped being a shadow of her and became something entirely your own. Elena held the phone tightly, sitting on Valentina's balcony, watching the Arno River gleam in the moonlight. Why did you keep dreaming about her? Guilt. The word came out heavy. I destroyed her. I made her believe she was worthless to me. Even after I fell in love with you, part of me couldn't release the weight of what I'd done to her. And now I dream about you. His voice softened. Only you. Every night since you left, it's been your face. Your voice. Your absence haunting me. Elena closed her eyes. The wound he'd made wasn't healed. It might never fully heal. But it was finally beginning to close. 2 months after she'd fled Rome, Elena returned. Not to the estate. Not yet. She took a small apartment in the city, determined to build something of her own before she merged her life back into his. Alessandro accepted this with more grace than she'd expected. He visited when she invited him. He left when she needed space. He shared meals with her at restaurants she chose. Walked beside her through neighborhoods he'd probably never noticed from behind tinted windows. He was learning to exist in her world instead of always demanding she exist in his. "This is strange for you," she observed one evening, as they walked along the Tiber. "Being out in the open like this. It is. You hate it. I hate the risk." His hand found hers, fingers interlacing. "But I love the reason." She smiled despite herself. The ink on his knuckles pressed against her skin as he held her hand. The tattoos hadn't changed. Still there, still marking him as a man of violence and control. But their meaning had shifted somehow. They weren't barriers anymore. They were history. His history. And now, slowly, hers. The confrontation came without warning. Elena was meeting Valentina for lunch. Their first meeting since Elena had left Florence. A deliberate attempt at healing, at building the sisterhood they'd lost somewhere along the way. Valentina walked into the restaurant and froze. Alessandro stood at Elena's side, his hand on the small of her back, his presence unmistakable even in civilian clothes. "I didn't know he'd be here," Valentina said quietly. "I asked him to come." Elena stepped forward. "We need to talk. All three of us." The lunch that followed was uncomfortable, tense, and absolutely necessary. Alessandro told Valentina the truth about why he'd sent her away. Valentina listened with tears streaming down her face. 3 years of resentment crumbling in the face of revelations she'd never expected. "You let me believe you didn't love me," she finally said. "You let me spend years thinking I wasn't enough. I know." His voice held no defense. "I was wrong. I thought I was protecting you, but I was really just protecting myself. From the fear of watching you die because of me." Valentina looked at Elena. And her? Was she protection too? At first, Alessandro's honesty was brutal. "She looked like you. She made the pain easier to bear. But she became more than that. She became everything." The sisters shared a long look. "I don't hate you," Valentina finally said to Alessandro. "I thought I did. But..." She shook her head. "I think I just hate what happened. What we lost. I'm sorry. I know." She turned to Elena. "He loves you," she said simply. "Anyone can see it. The way he looks at you. I don't think he ever looked at me that way." "Valentina, it's okay." Her smile was sad but genuine. "I've had 3 years to move on. And seeing you two together." She laughed softly. "I think maybe this is how it was supposed to be. Maybe I was just a stepping stone." "That's not." "Let me finish." Valentina took a breath. "I'm glad you found each other. Even if it hurts. Even if part of me will always wonder what might have been. I'm glad my sister found someone who looks at her like she's the center of the universe." Elena reached across the table and took her sister's hand. "Can we try again?" she asked. "Start over? Be sisters again?" Valentina squeezed her fingers. "I'd like that." That night, Alessandro took Elena to the estate for the first time since she'd left. The gardens were exactly as she remembered. Her gardens, the ones she'd designed and planted and nurtured for 3 years. Moonlight silvered the roses. The fountain bubbled softly in the darkness. "I haven't changed anything," he said quietly. "I couldn't. It felt like erasing you." She walked the familiar paths, trailing her fingers over petals she'd once considered her children. "I was happy here," she admitted. "Even when I was drowning in your shadow, there were moments of real happiness. And now..." She turned to face him. He stood at the edge of the garden, his dark suit blending with the shadows, his tattoos catching moonlight, the ink on his neck, the marks on his forearms where his sleeves were rolled, the symbols on his knuckles, pressed against his thighs. The same man who had shattered her. The same man who was trying so hard to rebuild her. I'm still figuring that out, she said honestly. He crossed the garden to stand before her, his hands finding her waist with familiar ease. Take whatever time you need. I meant what I said. I'll wait forever if that's what it takes. And if I decide I can't come back? His jaw tightened. Then I'll let you go. Really let you go this time. Not because I want to, but because you deserve the choice I took from Valentina. You've changed. You've changed me. His forehead pressed against hers. I was a monster before you, controlled everything, felt nothing. You made me feel Elena. You made me want something other than power. What do you want now? You. The word came out raw. Just you. In whatever form you're willing to give. She kissed him. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a start. When she pulled back, his eyes were dark with hope and fear and something that looked terrifyingly like love. I'll move back in, she said quietly. He went still. But things will be different. I'll have my own space, my own life. I won't disappear into your shadow again. Whatever you need. And if I ever find out you're keeping secrets again about Valentina, about threats, about anything, I'm gone. For good this time. I understand. She studied his face, searching for cracks in his sincerity. She found none. Okay, she breathed. Okay, let's try this. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her against his chest, his heart hammering beneath her ear. Thank you, he whispered into her hair. Thank you for giving me another chance. She didn't respond with words. She just held him, standing in the garden she'd built, beneath stars that had witnessed her destruction and now watched her slow reconstruction. It wasn't happily ever after. Not yet, but it was something close to beginning. The weeks that followed were a careful dance. Elena moved back into the estate, but into a separate wing. Rooms she'd never used before, decorated according to her own taste rather than his. She kept her apartment in the city too, a safety net she wasn't ready to release. Alessandro gave her space. He didn't push for more than she offered. He joined her for dinners when she invited him, retreated to his study when she needed solitude, shared her bed only when she reached for him first. He was trying. She could see the effort it cost him, the controlled man learning to release control, the king learning to kneel. Every time he deferred to her wishes, every time he stepped back when he wanted to step forward, she saw the struggle beneath his surface. And she loved him for it. She hadn't been sure at first. The love she'd carried for 3 years had been tainted by doubt, by the question of whether he'd ever truly seen her. But watching him now, watching him fight his own nature for her sake, she felt something new beginning to grow, something that might actually last. 3 months after her return, Alessandro took her to a charity event. It was the first time they'd appeared publicly together since the scandal of her departure. Rumors had circulated. The Mafia Boss's woman had fled, had been spotted with her sister, had allegedly been involved with another man. All lies. But the rumors had damaged his reputation nonetheless. Elena walked into the event on his arm, wearing a gown he'd had designed for her, dark blue silk that caught the light like water. Her jewelry was modest compared to the dripping diamonds around them, but Alessandro's eyes told her she outshone them all. People are staring, she murmured. Let them. His hand pressed firmly against her lower back, guiding her through crowds that parted instinctively for the Vitali name. His tattoos were hidden tonight, collar buttoned, sleeves down, gloves covering his knuckles. He had dressed for her, she realized, hidden the marks that reminded her of what he was. The gesture made her heart ache. You didn't have to cover them, she said quietly. He glanced at her in surprise. The tattoos. She touched his gloved hand. You didn't have to hide them for my sake. I thought. They're part of you. I don't love a version of you. I love all of you. Even the parts that scare me. Something shifted in his expression. Something vulnerable and grateful and fierce. Dance with me. She let him lead her to the floor. They moved together seamlessly, muscle memory carrying them through steps they'd practiced 100 times. His body was warm against hers, his hands steady on her waist, his breath soft against her hair. I have something to ask you, he said quietly. Here. Nowhere better. She looked up at him, curiosity overcoming caution. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small box. Elena's heart stopped. 3 years ago, I let the wrong woman go because I thought I was protecting her. His voice was low enough that only she could hear. I won't make that mistake again. He opened the box. The ring inside was stunning. A single diamond surrounded by sapphires, set in platinum that glinted in the chandelier light. Not ostentatious, not overwhelming, just perfect. Marry me, he said. The dance floor kept spinning around them. Music played. People laughed and drank and never noticed the moment unfolding in their midst. Alessandro, I know I don't deserve you. I know I've made mistakes that might never be fully forgiven. But I love you, Elena. I love you more than power, more than control, more than my own life. And I want the world to know it. She stared at the ring. 3 years ago, she had fallen in love with a broken man who didn't know how to feel. She had given him everything and received carefully measured portions in return. But this was different. This was a man on his knees, metaphorically if not literally. A man who had learned that control wasn't the same as love. A man who was offering her not just a ring, but everything he had ever been afraid to give. Yes, the word fell from her lips without hesitation. His face transformed, the controlled mask crumbling into something young and vulnerable and overwhelming with joy. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he kissed her. The dance floor erupted in whispers, but Elena didn't care. The only thing that mattered was the man holding her, the ring on her finger, and the future spreading out before them like an unwritten story. They married 1 month later. Not a grand affair. That would come later, Alessandro promised, when the political landscape allowed for celebration. Instead, a private ceremony in the garden Elena had built, witnessed only by Marco, Valentina, and a priest who asked no questions. Elena wore white silk. Alessandro wore black. His tattoos were visible, neck, forearms, knuckles, because she had asked him not to hide them. They were part of him, part of them. I, Alessandro Vitali, take you, Elena Sartori, to be my wife. His voice was steady but thick with emotion. To love and protect, to honor and cherish, from this day until my last breath. She smiled through tears. I, Elena Sartori, take you, Alessandro Vitali, to be my husband. To love and challenge, to trust and forgive, through every shadow and every light. The priest pronounced them married. Alessandro kissed her as if she were air and he'd been drowning. But even on the happiest day, shadows lingered. The Benedettis hadn't forgotten their grudge. The failed kidnapping had been a humiliation, one that demanded answer. Rumors reached Alessandro's network. Plans were forming, alliances shifting, danger gathering on the horizon. We should postpone the honeymoon, Marco advised the morning after the wedding. Alessandro's expression hardened. No, boss. She deserves this. We both do. His fingers traced the ring on his own hand, a match to hers, platinum engraved with Italian words she'd chosen herself. Semper insieme, always together. I'll handle the Benedettis when we return, he continued. But right now my wife and I are leaving the country, and anyone who tries to stop us will regret the attempt. Marco bowed his head in acceptance. They flew to Amalfi that afternoon. The villa hung on cliffs above the sea, white walls and blue shutters, waves crashing endlessly against rocks far below. Elena stood on the balcony as sunset painted the water gold, feeling, for the first time in months, completely at peace. Alessandro came up behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. What are you thinking? He murmured against her hair. That I almost lost this. That if I'd kept running, if I'd never come back. But you did come back. She turned in his arms to face him. The evening light caught his features. The sharp jaw, the dark eyes, the tattoos that climbed his neck like declarations of war and love and everything between. He was still dangerous, still controlled more than he released, still capable of terrible things. But he was also hers. I love you, she said. His breath caught. She didn't say it often, too wounded perhaps to offer the words freely. Each time felt like a gift. I love you too. His forehead pressed against hers. More than you'll ever know. She pulled him inside. The door closed behind them. The last light of sunset spilled across the floor, and then even that faded away. The honeymoon lasted 3 perfect days. 3 days of Elena waking to the sound of waves crashing against ancient cliffs. 3 days of Alessandro's hands tracing patterns on her skin as morning light spilled through gauze curtains. 3 days of meals shared on sun-drenched terraces, of wine that tasted like heaven, of learning each other's bodies and minds all over again. She had never seen him so relaxed. The tension that lived permanently in his shoulders seemed to dissolve in the salt air. His smiles came easier here, away from Rome and its endless demands. He laughed at her terrible jokes. He let her drag him to tourist shops where she bought ridiculous souvenirs neither of them needed. He was almost normal, almost human. "We should stay forever," Elena murmured on the 3rd evening, curled against his chest on their private beach. Stars scattered across the sky above them, and the Mediterranean stretched endless and dark before them. His arm tightened around her. "Say the word. You'd abandon your empire for a beach house? I'd abandon anything for you." She tilted her head to study his face. The moonlight caught the tattoos on his neck, the ink that spelled words she now knew by heart. Famiglia, honor, sang. Family, honor, blood. "You don't mean that." "I do." His eyes met hers, and she saw the terrifying sincerity in their depths. "The empire, the power, the name, none of it matters if you're not beside me. I spent 3 years building something I thought would fill the emptiness. Didn't. Only you did that." Elena's throat tightened. She wanted to believe him completely. Part of her did. But the wounds from months ago still ached when she pressed too hard. The memory of her sister's name falling from his sleeping lips, the realization that she might have been a replacement all along. The scars were healing, but scars never fully disappeared. "Let's go inside," she whispered. He carried her back to the villa. The door had barely closed behind them when his phone began to ring. Alessandro froze. His arms tensed around her, his jaw hardening into the familiar lines of the man who ruled an empire. For a moment, she watched him war with himself, the husband who wanted to ignore the world, and the boss who knew he couldn't. "Answer it," she said quietly. He set her down gently and pulled the phone from his pocket. His expression darkened as he read the caller ID. "Marco, this better be." He stopped, listened. The color drained from his face. Elena's stomach dropped. "When?" His voice had gone cold, controlled, dangerous. "How many casualties?" "No, don't move until I give the order. I'll be there in 6 hours." He ended the call. What happened? Alessandro turned to face her, and she barely recognized the man looking back. The relaxed husband from moments ago had vanished, replaced by the Mafia boss she'd spent 3 years learning to fear. "The Benedettis attacked one of our warehouses. 12 men dead. They left a message." "What message?" His jaw tightened. "Your name, written in blood on the wall." The world tilted beneath Elena's feet. "They're coming for me. They're trying to draw me out, to make me sloppy, emotional." His hands clenched into fists at his sides, the tattoos on his knuckles stretching white with tension. "They know you're my weakness. They're betting I'll make mistakes trying to protect you. Will you?" The question hung between them. Alessandro crossed the room in 3 strides and took her face in his hands. His thumbs traced her cheekbones, his eyes boring into hers with intensity that stole her breath. "I will burn their entire organization to the ground," he said quietly. "I will hunt every man who signed that message. I will make them regret ever speaking your name. But I will not make mistakes. I will not let them take you from me." She believed him. That was the terrifying part. She believed every word. They flew back to Rome before dawn. The estate had transformed in their absence. Security had tripled. Armed men patrolled the grounds at all hours. The gates remained permanently sealed, opened only by Alessandro's direct command. Elena felt the walls closing in the moment she stepped through the door. "You're safe here," Alessandro assured her, reading her expression. "Nothing gets through without my knowledge." "I know." But safety felt a lot like imprisonment when the walls grew tall enough. Marco was waiting in Alessandro's study, his face grim. Maps covered the desk, tactical layouts, surveillance photos, lists of names Elena didn't recognize. The world of violence Alessandro inhabited spread across the polished wood like a disease. The Benedettis have gone dark, Marco reported. After the warehouse attack, they pulled all their visible operations underground. Our sources can't locate their leadership. They're planning something bigger. Likely, the message they left, Mrs. Vitali's name, suggests they want you off balance. Reactive instead of strategic. Alessandro's hand found Elena's, squeezing once before releasing. I won't give them that satisfaction. We continue operations as normal. Show no weakness. And Mrs. Vitali? She doesn't leave the estate. Not for any reason. Elena's spine stiffened. Don't I get a say in this? Both men turned to look at her. These people wrote your name in blood, Alessandro said carefully. They want to take you, hurt you, use you against me. Until the threat is neutralized, I need you where I can protect you. So I'm a prisoner again. You're my wife. There's a difference. Is there? The words came out sharper than she intended. She saw the wound register on his face, quickly smoothed away behind his controlled mask. I'm trying to keep you alive, Elena. I know. She softened her voice. I know you are, but I spent 3 years disappearing into your world, becoming invisible, losing myself. I can't do that again, even for safety. What do you suggest? She thought for a moment. Let me help. Marco's eyebrows rose. I know things about this world that your men don't. I've watched you for 3 years. I've listened. I've learned. She met Alessandro's gaze directly. I'm not helpless, and I refuse to be treated like a porcelain doll while you fight a war that involves me. Silence stretched through the study. Alessandro studied her face. Reading her, she knew the way he read everyone, searching for weakness, for doubt, for anything he could use to convince her to stay safely locked away. He found nothing. Marco, he said finally, bring Mrs. Vitali into the briefings. Full access to intelligence regarding the Benedetti threat. Marco's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Yes, sir. Alessandro turned back to Elena. You don't leave the estate. You don't make contact with anyone outside our network, but you'll be part of the operation. Equal partner. It wasn't everything she wanted, but it was more than she'd expected. Thank you. He pulled her close, his lips brushing her forehead. Don't thank me. Just stay alive. The days that followed were tense and exhausting. Elena threw herself into learning the intricacies of Alessandro's conflict with the Benedettis. She studied maps until she could navigate their territory blindfolded. She memorized faces, names, relationships. She sat in on meetings where men twice her age discussed strategies for violence she didn't fully understand. And slowly, she began to see the shape of the threat. The Benedetti family wasn't just a rival organization, they were a dying one. Their leader, Enzo Benedetti, had been diagnosed with terminal cancer 6 months ago. His son, Luca, had taken control of day-to-day operations, but Luca was reckless, ambitious, desperate to prove himself before his father's death. He wants a legacy, Elena realized during one late-night briefing. He wants to be remembered as the man who brought down Alessandro Vitali. Marco nodded slowly. That tracks with our intelligence. The warehouse attack was bold, public, not strategic, theatrical. He's not trying to win, Elena continued, her mind racing. He's trying to make a statement, even if it costs him everything. Alessandro sat back in his chair, his dark eyes fixed on her with something like pride. What would you suggest? Stop playing defense. He wants you reactive. Give him proactive. Hit him where it hurts before he can strike again. And where does it hurt? Elena pointed to a name on the organizational chart. His sister, Giulia Benedetti. She's not involved in the business, but Luca worships her. She's the only family he has left besides his dying father. Marco shifted uncomfortably. You're suggesting we target a civilian? I'm suggesting we invite her to dinner. Both men stared at her. Elena smiled grimly. Not everything has to be violence. Sometimes the most powerful weapon is a conversation. If we can turn Giulia, or even just make Luca believe she's in danger, he'll do something stupid, Alessandro finished. He'll expose himself trying to protect her. Exactly. Silence filled the study. Then Alessandro began to laugh. It wasn't his polished public laugh, the controlled chuckle he offered at social events. This was real, surprised, almost delighted. "Marco," he said, still smiling, "I think my wife just outstrategized both of us." Marco didn't look pleased about it, but he nodded. "She might have a point. Set up a meeting with Giulia Benedetti. Somewhere public. Non-threatening. Elena will make the approach." Elena's heart hammered. "Me? You suggested it. And you're right. A woman approaching her will seem less threatening than one of my men." He met her eyes, his expression sobering. "But the moment anything feels wrong, you get out. Marco will have a team nearby. One signal and they extract you." "I understand. Do you?" He rose from his chair and crossed to stand before her, his hands finding her waist. "Because if something happens to you, nothing will happen. You don't know that. I know that I trust myself. And I know that you've trained your men well enough to protect me." She rose on her toes to kiss him softly. "Let me do this. Let me be more than just your weakness." His forehead pressed against hers. "You were never just my weakness," he murmured. "You've always been my strength. I was just too blind to see it." The meeting was arranged for 3 days later. Elena spent those days preparing, studying everything known about Giulia Benedetti, rehearsing approaches, memorizing escape routes. Marco drilled her on signals, on emergency protocols, on what to do if everything went wrong. Alessandro watched it all with barely concealed anxiety. "You don't have to do this," he said the night before, lying beside her in their bed. His hand traced idle patterns on her bare shoulder, the tattoos on his forearm dark against her pale skin. "I know. We can find another way. There isn't another way. Not one that doesn't involve more bloodshed." She turned to face him, her palm pressing against his cheek. "I want to end this. I want us to have a life that isn't shadowed by threats. And if this doesn't work, then we try something else. But at least I'll know I contributed. At least I'll know I wasn't just waiting to be saved." He pulled her closer, his body warm and solid against hers. "I love you," he said quietly. "I don't say it enough. I know I don't. But I love you more than." "I know." She kissed him. "I know you do." They didn't sleep that night. The cafe was small and tucked away in a corner of Rome that tourists rarely found. Elena arrived early, choosing a table near the window where she could watch the street. Her heart pounded beneath her silk blouse, but her hands remained steady as she ordered an espresso. Marco's team was invisible but present. She could feel them in the crowd, the watching eyes she'd learned to recognize. Alessandro himself was parked 3 blocks away, close enough to reach her in minutes if everything went wrong. She wasn't alone. She kept reminding herself of that. Giulia Benedetti arrived at precisely 11 o'clock. She was younger than Elena expected, mid-20s, with dark hair pulled back in a severe ponytail and eyes that darted nervously around the cafe before settling on Elena's table. "Mrs. Vitali?" Her voice was cautious. "Please call me Elena." She gestured to the empty chair. "Thank you for coming." Giulia sat slowly, her posture rigid with suspicion. "Your invitation was unexpected." "I imagine so. My brother will be furious when he finds out." "Then let's make sure he doesn't find out until we want him to." Elena leaned forward slightly. "I'm not here to threaten you, Giulia. I'm here because I think we might want the same thing." "And what's that?" "An end to this war before it destroys everyone we love." Giulia's expression flickered. Surprise, then uncertainty, then a guarded hope she tried to hide. "You don't know my brother. He won't stop until he's destroyed your father's legacy trying to build his own." "I know." Elena softened her voice. "I also know that you've been trying to talk him down, that you've begged him to negotiate instead of attack, that you're terrified of what happens when your father dies and Luca has no one left to temper his worst impulses." "How do you know that?" "Because I know what it's like to love someone dangerous. Someone who makes terrible choices because they're too proud or too wounded to see another way." Elena met her eyes directly. "My husband isn't a good man. I don't pretend otherwise. But he's trying to be better. He's trying to protect what he loves without destroying everyone in his path. And you think Luca can do the same?" "I think he could with the right influence. with family who refuses to let him spiral. Elena took a breath. I'm not asking you to betray your brother. I'm asking you to save him. Before it's too late. Julia stared at her for a long moment. What exactly are you proposing? A meeting. Your brother and my husband. Neutral territory, no weapons, no soldiers. A chance to discuss terms before more blood is spilled. Luca will never agree to that. He will if you convince him. Elena reached across the table, not quite touching Julia's hand. You know I'm right. You know this war has no winners. Help me end it. The silence stretched. Then slowly Julia nodded. I'll talk to him. I can't promise anything, but I'll try. Elena released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. That's all I'm asking. They talked for another hour, carefully, tentatively, two women navigating the treacherous waters between their families. By the time Julia left, something that might eventually become trust had begun to form. Elena waited until she was out of sight before signaling Marco. Success. Moving to extraction point. She was 3 steps from the door when everything went wrong. The men came from nowhere. One moment the cafe was quiet, peaceful, the next. 4 men in dark suits were surrounding her, blocking the exits, their hands closing around her arms before she could even scream. Mrs. Vitali. A familiar voice. She turned to find Luca Benedetti himself stepping through the door, his smile cold and triumphant. Did you really think we wouldn't be watching? Elena's blood ran cold. Where's your team? Luca continued, glancing around theatrically. Ah, yes. Dealing with a small distraction I arranged a few blocks away. By the time they realized the bomb threat was a decoy, you'll be long gone. Alessandro will find me. I'm counting on it. Luca's smile widened. That's the whole point, isn't it? He'll come charging in to rescue his precious wife, and I'll be waiting. The men dragged her toward a back exit. Elena struggled, but they were too strong, too prepared. Her mind raced through options. The signal to Marco, the panic button hidden in her bracelet, the knife strapped to her thigh. Don't bother, Luca said, noticing her calculating expression. We've jammed all signals in a 3-block radius. Your husband can't hear you. No one can. The back door opened onto an alley. A black van waited, engine running. Elena twisted desperately, managing to rake her nails across one captor's face. He swore and released her for half a second, enough time for her to grab the knife from her thigh and slash wildly. Blood sprayed. The man stumbled back. She ran. Behind her, Luca's voice rang out. Don't kill her. I need her alive. Footsteps pounded the pavement behind her as she sprinted through narrow streets, her heart slamming against her ribs. She didn't know where she was going. Only that she had to keep moving, had to find somewhere. The alley ended in a wall. Dead end. Elena spun, knife raised, as Luca and his remaining men cornered her. Impressive, Luca admitted, slightly breathless. I see why he married you. But it's over now. It's not over until I'm dead. I don't want you dead. I want you useful. He stepped closer, unconcerned by her blade. Imagine his face when he sees you, bruised, broken, begging for mercy. Imagine what he'll do, what mistakes he'll make, trying to save you. You don't know him. I know he loves you. That's enough. Luca nodded to his men. Take her. They moved toward her. Elena slashed at the first, opening a gash across his arm. The second grabbed her from behind, pinning her arms. The knife clattered to the ground. Get off me. A gunshot echoed through the alley. One of Luca's men dropped. Then another. Elena looked up to find Alessandro standing at the mouth of the alley, a gun in each hand, his face carved from ice. Behind him, Marco and a dozen armed men spread through the narrow space like a wave of darkness. Step away from my wife. His voice was quiet, controlled, absolutely terrifying. Luca's remaining men exchanged nervous glances. You'll never make it in time, Luca said, but his confidence had cracked. One wrong move and she dies. Then make a move. Alessandro's eyes never left Luca's face. See what happens. The standoff stretched. Elena felt the arms holding her tremble. The man was afraid, genuinely afraid of the devil standing 20 feet away. You can't protect her forever, Luca said. You can't. Can't what? Alessandro stepped forward, and Elena saw something in his face she'd never witnessed before. Not anger, not even rage. Pure, absolute emptiness. You wrote her name in blood, Alessandro continued, his voice soft as death. You tried to take her from me. You put your hands on what's mine. Another step. I was going to offer you terms. A chance to walk away. My wife convinced me that mercy was possible, that even a man like you could be reasoned with. Another step. She was wrong. He moved so fast Elena barely saw it. One moment Luca stood 5 feet away. The next he was on the ground, Alessandro's foot on his throat, the gun pressed between his eyes. Let her go, Alessandro said to the remaining man. Now. The man released Elena immediately. She stumbled forward, catching herself against the alley wall, her whole body shaking. Elena. Marco appeared at her side, checking for injuries. Are you hurt? I'm fine. A gunshot. She looked up to find Luca Benedetti dead on the ground, a neat hole in his forehead. Alessandro stood over the body, his expression unchanged. The tattoos on his neck seemed darker in the shadows, the ink on his knuckles gleaming wet with blood that wasn't his. He looked at her. For a moment, she didn't recognize him. He wasn't the man who held her at night, who whispered promises against her hair, who had learned to soften for her sake. He was the monster, the one she'd always known lived beneath the surface. Take her home, Alessandro said to Marco. I'll finish here. Alessandro, Elena started. Go home, Elena. His voice was flat. You shouldn't see this. See what? You already. There are others. He turned away from her, toward the men he'd brought. The Benedetti organization ends tonight. Every man who knew about the plan to take you. Every person who wrote your name or thought it or dreamed of using you against me. Alessandro, wait. Marco. Now. Marco took her arm gently. Mrs. Vitali, please. She let herself be led away. But she looked back once. Just once. And saw her husband walking deeper into the darkness. Toward violence she couldn't imagine. Toward blood she couldn't unsee. She didn't sleep that night. The estate was quiet, but Elena could feel the tension humming through the walls. Men moved in the shadows outside. Phones rang and were silenced. Whispered conversations she wasn't meant to hear filtered through closed doors. Alessandro didn't return until dawn. She heard him first, the soft sound of his footsteps, the creak of their bedroom door. She sat up in bed as he entered, his silhouette backlit by the rising sun. He looked exhausted, and he was covered in blood. It's done, he said quietly. The Benedettis are finished. You're safe. She didn't move. He stood frozen in the doorway, waiting. She could see his uncertainty, the fear that he'd finally shown her too much darkness, that she would look at him now and see only the monster. How many? She whispered. Elena, how many people died tonight? He was silent for a long moment. Enough. She closed her eyes. This was who he was. This was who he'd always been. She had known it, accepted it, married it. But knowing and witnessing were different things. Come here, she finally said. He crossed the room slowly, as if approaching a wild animal. He stopped at the edge of the bed, looking down at her with eyes that held everything he couldn't say. I'm sorry, he said. I'm sorry you saw. Don't. She reached for his hand, pulling him down onto the mattress. Don't apologize for protecting me. I killed them, Elena. I killed. I know what you did. Her voice was steady despite the storm inside her. I know who you are. I've always known. And you still? I still love you. The words came out fierce, almost angry. I still love you, even when you terrify me. Even when you become the monster everyone else sees. I love you because I know that monster exists to protect what's his. He pulled her into his arms, his face buried in her hair, his whole body shaking with something that might have been sobs. I thought I'd lost you, he choked out. When I saw them take you, when I thought, I'm here. I'm right here. I would have burned the whole city down. If they'd hurt you, I know. She stroked his hair, his back, anywhere she could reach. I know you would have. And that should scare me more than it does. Why doesn't it? She pulled back to look at him. The blood on his clothes, the exhaustion carved into his face, the vulnerability he only ever showed her. Because I'm yours, she said simply. And you're mine. And whatever darkness that means, whatever blood that costs, we face it together. He kissed her then, desperate and raw, tasting of violence and devotion. I don't deserve you, he breathed against her lips. Probably not. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy. I'll hold you to that. He pulled her down onto the bed, and she let herself fall into his arms, into the complicated, impossible, beautiful mess of loving him. The sun rose fully outside their window. The blood would wash off. The nightmares would fade. The world would rebuild itself around them. But in that moment, there was only this two damaged people holding each other in the light. The months that followed were quiet. The Benedetti organization crumbled without leadership. Enzo died 3 weeks after his son, broken by grief and illness. The remaining members scattered, some absorbed into other families, some fleeing Italy entirely. No one threatened Elena again. Alessandro kept his promise. He told her everything. Every operation, every decision, every dark corner of his empire. She sat in on meetings. She offered opinions. She became, slowly and deliberately, his true partner. You're changing him, Marco observed one evening, watching Alessandro laugh at something Elena had said. I've known him 15 years. He's never been like this. He was always like this, Elena replied. He just didn't have permission to show it. Marco considered this. Maybe you're right. Valentina visited monthly, her relationship with Elena healing slowly. The sisters didn't discuss Alessandro anymore. There was nothing left to say. The past was the past. The present belonged to Elena alone. You look happy, Valentina said during one visit, studying her sister across a cafe table. I am happy. Elena smiled. Terrified sometimes, overwhelmed, often, but happy. That's more than most people get. I know. Elena had stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. She had stopped bracing for betrayal, for disappointment, for the revelation that she was still just a shadow of what he really wanted. She wasn't Valentina's replacement anymore. She was his wife, his partner, his equal. She was finally herself. 1 year after their wedding, Alessandro took her back to Amalfi. The same villa, the same cliffs, the same endless sea stretching toward horizons she couldn't name. But everything felt different now. They sat on the balcony as sunset painted the water gold, his hand warm around hers, his thumb tracing the ring on her finger. I have something to tell you, Elena said quietly. He turned to look at her, his expression curious. I'm pregnant. The world stopped. She watched his face cycle through emotions. Shock, disbelief, wonder, fear, before settling on something that looked like awe. You're 12 weeks. I wanted to be sure before I told you. We're having a baby. We're having a baby. He pulled her into his arms so carefully, as if she might shatter, his face buried in her hair. She felt the tears before she heard them. Alessandro Vitali, Mafia Boss, feared by thousands, crying silently against her shoulder. I didn't think I'd ever have this, he choked out. Family. A real family. I thought that was for other people, people who deserved it. You deserve it. She pulled back to cup his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. You deserve love and happiness and children who adore you. You deserve everything, Alessandro. I only deserve it because of you. Then I guess you're stuck with me. He laughed through his tears. A real laugh, full of joy and relief and overwhelming gratitude. I've never been more stuck on anything in my life. He kissed her then, soft and reverent, his hands sliding to rest on her still flat stomach. I'll protect you both, he promised. With everything I have. With everything I am. I know. Our child will never know the darkness I grew up in. They'll never feel unloved or unwanted or afraid. I know that too. He looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw the man he was still becoming. Still flawed, still dangerous, still capable of terrible things, but also capable of this tenderness, devotion. a love so fierce it had reshaped the entire world around them. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For staying. For coming back. For seeing past the monster to the man." His forehead pressed against hers. "For giving me a family I never thought I'd have." Elena smiled, tears streaming down her own cheeks. "Thank you for being worth staying for." Their daughter was born in the spring. They named her Sophia, a name that meant wisdom, that had belonged to Alessandro's mother, that felt like a bridge between the past and the future they were building. She had her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn chin. She was perfect. Alessandro held her in the hospital room, his massive hands impossibly gentle, tears streaming down his face as he counted her tiny fingers. "She's so small," he whispered. "All babies are small. What if I hurt her? What if I—" "You won't." Elena reached out to touch his arm, feeling the tattoos beneath her fingers. "You're going to be an incredible father." "How do you know?" "Because you love so fiercely when you let yourself. Because you've spent the last 9 months researching parenting techniques like they were business strategies. Because I've watched you become someone I never thought possible." He looked at her, his eyes swimming. "I love you. I love you too." Sophia made a small sound, her tiny fist waving in the air. "She's hungry," the nurse said, approaching with a smile. "First feeding is always the hardest." They navigated it together, the awkwardness, the uncertainty, the terrifying vulnerability of new parenthood. Alessandro hovered at Elena's shoulder, adjusting pillows, fetching water, doing everything in his power to help even when there was nothing he could do. By the time Sophia fell asleep at Elena's breast, the sun had fully risen outside the hospital window. "We did it," Elena murmured. "We did it." Alessandro kissed her forehead. "We built something beautiful." She looked at him, her husband, her partner, the monster who had become a man for her sake. "The most beautiful thing," she agreed. The years that followed were full of noise and chaos and more love than Elena had ever imagined possible. Sophia grew from a fussy infant into a curious toddler into a fierce little girl who had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. Alessandro, the man who had ruled an empire with an iron fist, was reduced to jelly by a single "please, Papa" from his daughter. "She's going to destroy you," Elena observed one evening, watching Sophia convince Alessandro to play tea party for the 4th time that week. "Already has." He didn't look remotely bothered by this fact. His empire continued, there was no escaping that reality. But he delegated more, trusted more, spent more time at home with his family than in the shadow world that had once consumed him. The tattoos on his neck still marked him as what he was, but they no longer defined him. He was more than the ink now. He was a husband, a father, a man who had learned that power meant nothing without love. Marco took on more responsibility, eventually becoming a partner rather than just a right hand. The organization evolved under their shared leadership, still dangerous, still outside the law, but more controlled, more selective about the violence they embraced. Elena never became comfortable with that violence, but she accepted it as part of the man she loved, a part she couldn't change and wouldn't try to. Some darkness never fully lifted. She had made her peace with that. On their 5th anniversary, Alessandro took her to Florence. Not the villa where she'd fled after his betrayal, somewhere new. A small hotel overlooking the Arno, with windows that framed the same view she'd stared at during her darkest moments. "Why here?" she asked. "Because this is where you were when I thought I'd lost you forever. This is where I realized what an idiot I'd been. What I'd risked, what I'd nearly destroyed." He pulled her close, the river glittering behind them. "I wanted to reclaim it. Make it ours instead of just yours. You old romantic. Only for you." They walked the streets she'd wandered alone all those years ago. But everything felt different now. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't lost. She was exactly where she belonged. Valentina joined them for dinner on the 2nd night. She looked good, happy. Finally. With a new life she'd built away from both sisters' complicated pasts. She and Elena laughed more easily now. The old wounds faded to scars they could barely remember. "He's still terrified of me," Valentina observed, nodding toward Alessandro, who had excused himself to take a call. "He's terrified of what you represent." "And what's that?" "A mistake he almost made." A life he almost lived instead of the one he has now. Valentina smiled. I'm glad he made the right choice. Eventually. Me too. When Alessandro returned, he slid into the chair beside Elena with practiced ease, his hand finding hers beneath the table. Everything okay? She asked. Everything's perfect. The night ended with them alone on a rooftop terrace. Florence spread beneath them like a jewel box. Alessandro produced a small velvet case from his jacket. I already have a ring, Elena pointed out. This isn't a ring. He opened the case to reveal a pendant. A single diamond set in platinum, on a chain so delicate it looked like spun moonlight. It's beautiful, she breathed. It's from my mother's collection. The only piece I kept when my father destroyed everything else. He fastened it around her neck, his fingers gentle against her skin. I wanted you to have it. I wanted you to know that you're not just my wife, Elena. You're my family, my legacy, the only thing I've ever built that truly matters. She turned to face him, the pendant warm against her collarbone. I love you, she said. I know. His smile was soft, private. I know you do, and I'll spend every day I have left making sure you never regret it. I never have. Never. She thought about it, the pain, the betrayal, the months of doubt. The name whispered in darkness that had shattered her world. Never, she confirmed, because everything we went through made us what we are now. And what we are now, it's worth any price. He kissed her then, deep and slow, the city glittering beneath them like a promise. And she knew, with the same certainty she'd felt when she walked away from him all those years ago, that this was exactly where she was meant to be. In his arms, in his heart, in the life they'd built from the ashes of her pain and his regret. Together, they grew old together. Not gracefully, neither of them had ever been graceful. They fought and forgave and fought again because that was what real love looked like. They raised their daughter and then 2 more children. A son with his father's eyes, another daughter with her mother's smile. Alessandro's empire continued under new leadership, their son eventually taking the reins, reshaping the organization into something almost legitimate. The violence faded. The shadows retreated. The world moved on. But they remained. Elena and Alessandro, tangled together in bed each morning, arguing over breakfast, laughing at the absurdity of their ordinary extraordinary life. I never thought I'd be here, he admitted one night, his hair silver now, his tattoos faded but still visible. Old, content, loved. Neither did I, she replied, curled against his chest. But here we are. Here we are. He kissed her forehead, gently, reverently, the way he'd kissed her every night for 40 years. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For everything. For staying. For loving me anyway. For giving me a life worth living. She smiled against his chest. Thank you for being brave enough to earn it. Outside their window, the first light of dawn crept over the horizon. A new day. One of thousands they'd shared. One of thousands yet to come. The story of Alessandro Vitali and Elena Sartori didn't end with a grand gesture or a dramatic declaration. It ended the way the best love stories end. Quietly, simply, with 2 people who had chosen each other every day for decades. She had fled from him in the darkness, her heart shattered by a name that wasn't hers. He had chased her through his own transformation, becoming someone worthy of her return. And in the end, they had built something stronger than passion, deeper than obsession, more enduring than the empire that had once defined him. They had built a life, family, a love that conquered every shadow it faced. Not because it was easy, because it was real. Semper Insieme, always together. The end.